Hey everyone, happy Monday! So I'm back again with the Daily 5 to discuss Chapter 5, which is read to someone and listen to reading. So the first part, read to someone, is something that I actually worked on a lot this past school year, and so I'm going to tell you about it now in the questions. So number one, why should students be reading to someone? For them, number one, because it's really fun to read with a friend. Why I think they should be reading to someone is because this is such a great opportunity for them to just be practicing their reading. And it also kind of holds them accountable when they're doing read to self. If they get to a word that they aren't sure about, they can skip it. But when they're reading to someone, the other child's going to say, hey, you skipped that word. And so it really holds them accountable to utilize strategies that I've taught, and it really helps them to practice, build their fluency, their expression, and then finally, the students are able to actually show off their teaching skills. And I know from my own personal experience in school that I learned best when I was helping someone else. So I like to study with a partner or kind of do some tutoring. And this is essentially what read to someone is as well, is when they check for understanding or when they are coaching, they're being given the opportunity both to learn from their partner or for the partner to teach a skill or support a skill that I have already taught. So I do think that read to someone is a really important part of the Daily 5 and one that I definitely will not be skipping. Number two, how can your students sit eek or elbow, elbow, knee, knee? They loved this word. They thought it was really funny, and they also just like kind of saying what it means. Elbow to elbow, knee to knee. And so this worked really well in my class. For the most part, I had students staying on their bottom, crisscross applesauce, but if there was plenty of space on the carpet and they both laid down side to side right next to each other, I didn't have a problem with it. As long as they're on task and they're doing the actual reading, then it's fine for them to sit however they need to sit. And eventually, after doing it a few times, they kind of were like, oh, maybe we could sit back in our chairs too. And then I even had some students who just like to sit right next to each other at their tables and in the little kid chairs. So yeah, they could sit eek that way as well. Number three, how can your students read to someone, and how can you model these ways with your students? There are three ways that students can read to someone else. They can do, number one, I read, you read. Number two, choral read. And number three, read one book. And I modified number three, and I made it read one book or two. And the way I taught these was by explaining first and then doing some modeling and practicing with my students. So for the first one, I read, you read, I would have a student come up and we would talk about who was a better reader. Well, obviously, Miss G is the better reader because she's a grown-up. And so I would say, we're going to pick out the person who's able to read the page the most smoothly, the more fluent reader. And I use those words with my students as well. I want them to hear the academic language that I would be using if I were talking to a colleague. And so I read the page, and then I have the kindergartner read the page after me. And I say to everyone, don't you think it was a lot easier for them because they just heard me read it? And everyone agrees that, yeah, it would be a lot easier. So I said, when you're working with your partner, you need to decide who's the better reader. And, sometimes you can't really tell. You're both about the same, and so it doesn't matter who goes first. But when you're with someone who is clearly a better reader than you, it's okay to let them go first and to listen to their reading and then giving it a try. And I think for the most part, the kids kind of went back and forth with, just sharing who did the I read, you read, as opposed to really picking out who the better reader was. But that was fine, because they both got to practice reading the same amount. The second way of reading is choral reading, and this is when the two partners read together at the same time. Again, we do this a lot in class, kind of with small groups, and again, this is to build fluency and expression, so they were already familiar with this. I, again, would have students come up and practice. I actually would have students come up and practice this, and I wouldn't even need to model it, and I would have them both reading at the same time. So students caught on to the choral reading really quickly, and they utilized that on while they're doing their own read to someone independent time. And finally, there is read one book, and then I added or two. So this is when the students are sharing a book, and you have to figure out who wants to go first, who wants to go next. So when you're reading one book, the book has to be in the middle of the two students. One person reads one page, and then the other partner reads the other page, and they go on. And I said, well, this isn't always how we do this, because sometimes you both have a book, and you can both take turns reading the book. So partner one reads one page from their book, and then partner two reads one page from their book. And then we also did a lot with Check for Understanding, which something that I will continue to develop next year because this is more challenging for kindergartners. But I really felt like the explicit modeling and then the students practicing was really beneficial to them. And then the final question kind of ties into this. So number 4 says, what is one thing you have done with partner reading too that ensures the success of your students? So I really felt that letting the students build stamina was the best way of ensuring their success. I think it's really important for students to have the opportunity to practice for short periods of time, reading with their partner, practicing the different ways of reading like we had talked about or we had just modeled with the student modelers. So giving them enough time to build stamina, small increments, and then as they gain stamina, letting them read for longer and longer amounts of time. I also think that choosing partners at the beginning and then slowly releasing the responsibility onto the students was really helpful as well. So by doing this, I could pick out for the partners, who was going to work well together. And honestly, it wasn't even a matter of separating any students or putting together certain students. It was more just for like the ease of, just starting with, we're going to establish how we do read to someone first, and then we'll think about the whole partner aspect of it and picking a partner. So we're focusing on the reading first and then kind of the management of partners afterwards. I also thought it was really important to establish that reading with anyone was fun, not just your best friend. So even if you thought you were going to be reading with one of your buddies, but they ended up reading with someone else, it's okay to read with, the other kid in your row. And establishing that picking somebody new to read with can be really fun too. And by providing that opportunity at the beginning of our read to someone, by picking the partners for them, I kind of show the kids that it is really fun to read with somebody new who you haven't really read with or spent a lot of time with before. And especially now that I'm going to be doing this at the beginning of the kindergarten year, I think we'll have less of that urge where they want to buddy up with one person in particular because they don't know each other and they're still all figuring out who they want to play with and who their friends are. So I think that will work really well. Okay, so this is the end of the first part of this video for Daily 5, Chapter 5, which was all about read to someone. And so in part 2, you will be able to hear all about listen to reading. So stay tuned for that video, and I will see you guys soon. Bye!